Well, welcome back to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. This is where we unleash the power of understanding to build bridges and not boxes, because we understand that communication is the soil in which teamwork grows. And we all need teamwork in our businesses for us to thrive and for us to flourish. And today I want to talk about 5 quick wins that you could implement right away this week. They're completely different angles on this, but the 5 quick wins that came to mind that you could leverage straight away. And as we go through these, think of who else might benefit from hearing some of these quick wins. So first one would be to pause more often, not just in conversations, but also pause in your workday. Just give yourself a moment to hit pause and reflect, or maybe to use an intentional pause in a conversation or maybe a sales presentation, where you can use that pause to emphasize something that you want the person you're conveying information to really grasp it. So pausing really draws attention to what it is you've just said, like I'm doing right now. If you give someone space to reflect briefly on what you've said, it causes what you've said to sink more deeply into their consciousness and into their recollection. And if you allow others to have time to process what you've just said, then that also projects confidence, it projects authority, and it will benefit whoever's hearing your communication to be able to do that. So pause more often, and that will increase the effectiveness of your communication. Second comes from a completely different direction, and that is to ask open-ended questions. So too often we'll ask somebody, did you understand? Or can you do this? And the answer is simply going to be yes or no. And that is unhelpful on the whole in communication, because you lose out on whatever reaction or response you get from the person you're talking with, whether it's an employee or whether it's your boss that you want to get feedback from. Any of those settings, you need to leave the door open for there to be more communication. More content to your interaction. And so ask questions that begin with what or how. For example, what do you think is the most significant challenge in what we're talking about? Or how would you move forward from here? Questions that give the person you're interacting with the opportunity first to think and then to give you their insight into whatever it is you're discussing or whatever it is you're working on together. And that encourages dialogue, but it also increases engagement. And when we can increase engagement, that's when teamwork really flourishes. So practice and cultivate the skill of asking open-ended questions. What would it take for you to be able to answer an open-ended question the next time you're talking with someone? Or what would it take for you to be able to ask more open-ended questions in the setting that you are in? Pause and reflect on that, to use point number 1 again. But asking open-ended questions opens the door for more understanding, more perception of the challenges that we're dealing with, but also more engagement from the team in the process that you're in. Number 3 quick win would be to master the art of follow-up. When you've had a conversation with someone, or maybe you've presented a sales proposal, or maybe you've asked someone to give you feedback in a day or so. Use the messaging opportunities that you have, or email or whatever, maybe even a phone call, just to send a quick follow-up. Send them a voicemail, send them a voice memo, send them an email, just to summarize what you've talked about. To emphasize maybe the talking point that you were wanting to convey, and then to offer further support from that point forward. That little art of follow-up can really show that you're reliable to deal with, but it also keeps you top of mind and means that you're going to get the feedback you want. You're going to get the response that you're looking for. So master the art of follow-up. So taking all 3 together here, what would be one way that you could follow up from a recent interaction? Give yourself time to reflect on that. You see how these all work together, even though they're coming from different directions. Fourth quick win would be to use the power of 3 in team meetings or in presentations. And that's where you group into 3 main points, whatever idea that you are wanting to convey or you're wanting people to grasp. So it would be something like, here's what we achieved, here's what we learned, and here's what we'll do next. Grouping it into 3 like that, the human brain is wired to be able to work in 3s more effectively because it's like they kind of support each other, like a 3-legged stool. And so using the power of 3 when you're in a team meeting will help your team to work with you. Maybe I should have used 3 instead of 5 in this podcast and it would have been easier to remember. But making points in organized 3s is going to enable you to communicate more effectively, but it's also going to help your audience to remember what you've said. And finally, 5th quick win that you could implement this week is to audit all of your digital communication. So you'd review the emails you've sent or scan through the messages you've sent to people, direct messages or Slack messages, those kinds of things. Look for things like, does your tone or your clarity align with what you intended in that message? Did you come across too strong? Did you come across too fuzzy in the way you communicated a point or asked someone for their feedback or their input? You could make adjustments in the future. Things like if you're prone to communicating in long paragraphs, maybe you can shorten them. Maybe you can hone in. Maybe you could change complex ideas into simpler expressions. Maybe the wording is too complex. I remember very clearly somebody taught me a long time ago that if you can use one short Anglo-Saxon rooted word in place of 2 or 3 long Latin type words, then it's going to be a much simpler way for people to understand you. Or maybe it's just a question of adding a friendly sign-off to increase your approachability. Taking a moment to just review some of your recent communications that are in text form, whether it's emails or direct messages, can really be a win for you because you can give yourself the feedback of, I could have done this better, or if I do this in this way, it will help in the future. It only needs to take you a few minutes, but it could bear great fruit in the future. So why don't you think of someone who would benefit from one or more of these quick wins this week? Maybe text them or use the share link on your podcast app to send them this episode and say, hey, take a listen to this. I think it might be valuable for you. And if you've done that, maybe follow up with them after a day or two and say, hey, what did you think? What can we learn together? Maybe you'd help me to grow in this way or that way. Giving each other feedback in those ways is really valuable as we grow our communication mastery together. Next week, I've got some new content for you, but for now, please recommend the podcast to others and give me feedback too. Let me know what's been helpful and what you'd like to hear more of in the days ahead. I'll see you next week.